There is a loneliness that feels heavier than being single. A loneliness that doesn't arrive in empty rooms, but in shared beds. You are not abandoned. You are not unloved. You are not visibly unhappy. And yet, at night, while lying next to someone who once felt like everything, you feel emotionally alone. No argument happened. No betrayal occurred. No dramatic ending. Just a quiet, almost invisible distance that you cannot explain, and therefore cannot confront. You start asking yourself a question you feel guilty even thinking, how can I feel lonely when I am not alone? This is not the loneliness of absence. This is the loneliness of emotional invisibility. And modern relationships are filled with it. Tonight, we are not talking about breakups. We are talking about something far more subtle, far more common, and far more psychologically dangerous. The hidden loneliness that grows inside relationships that appear perfectly fine. Listen carefully, because this is not about someone else's relationship. This is about the quiet emotional shift happening in millions of homes, without anyone naming it. For most of human history, loneliness meant physical isolation. If you were lonely, you were alone. Today, loneliness has evolved. You can text all day. You can live together. You can post smiling photos. You can say, I love you, and still feel unseen, because loneliness is not about proximity. It is about emotional recognition. Humans do not only need presence. They need to feel psychologically perceived, to feel that someone understands not just what they say, but what they mean, not just what they show, but what they hide. When that perception fades, loneliness begins. Rejection is painful, but rejection is clear. You know where you stand. Emotional invisibility is different. It is subtle. You are not rejected. You are not attacked. You are not abandoned. You are simply not deeply seen anymore. Your partner listens but does not inquire. They respond but do not explore. They are present but not curious. And over time, you begin shrinking emotionally. You stop expressing certain thoughts because they feel unnecessary. You stop sharing certain fears because they feel misunderstood. You stop revealing certain dreams because they feel unimportant. Not because your partner is cruel, but because emotional curiosity quietly died. And when curiosity dies, connection suffocates. Modern relationships suffer from a silent epidemic. Surface-level functioning. Couples operate efficiently. Bills are paid. Plans are made. Schedules are coordinated. Life runs smoothly. But emotional depth requires something modern life rarely allows. Stillness, undistracted attention, slow conversation. Most couples are constantly multitasking life. Phones nearby, notifications active, work stress lingering, and emotional intimacy requires cognitive space. Without space, conversations become transactional. Without depth, emotional resonance weakens. Without resonance, loneliness begins growing inside togetherness. Hidden loneliness often begins with subtle self-editing. You sense that certain emotions create discomfort, so you tone them down. You sense certain topics create distance, so you avoid them. Gradually, you present a manageable version of yourself. Polished, stable, low conflict, but internally parts of you remain unexpressed. And when parts of you remain unseen for too long, you begin feeling alone even when loved, because love without recognition feels incomplete. Here is the tragedy most couples never realize. Often both partners feel it. Both sense something missing. Both assume the other is satisfied. Both avoid speaking first. Silence grows. Interpretations replace conversations. Emotional risk decreases. And two people slowly drift inward, not outward. They become emotionally self-sufficient inside the relationship. And emotional self-sufficiency inside intimacy is the beginning of distance. You can be loved for who you appear to be, but emotional fulfillment comes from being known for who you truly are. Being known requires vulnerability. Vulnerability requires safety. Safety requires attention. And attention is disappearing in modern life. Not because love is weaker today, but because distraction is stronger. When attention fractures, emotional connection fragments. And fragmented connection creates loneliness. Social media intensifies comparison. You see couples who appear emotionally expressive. Romantic gestures, deep captions, perfect smiles. And when your own relationship feels emotionally neutral, you assume something is wrong. But most modern relationships are experiencing the same silent shift. They look stable, but internally they lack emotional renewal. Comparison creates dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction increases emotional withdrawal. Withdrawal deepens loneliness. When emotional expression decreases, something happens internally. Unshared feelings accumulate. Unspoken disappointments stack quietly. Unvalidated experiences become internalized. And slowly emotional weight builds. But because there is no obvious conflict, there is no release. So the loneliness becomes chronic. Not sharp, just constant, like background noise in your emotional system. This is where hidden loneliness begins. Not with shouting, not with betrayal, but with decreasing emotional curiosity, shrinking vulnerability, and distracted attention. And the most dangerous part feels normal. And this is where things become uncomfortable, because hidden loneliness does not grow in chaotic relationships. It grows in stable ones, in relationships that look healthy, in relationships where there is no obvious crisis to fix. And that is precisely why it becomes dangerous, because what can't be clearly identified cannot be clearly repaired. Comfort feels safe, and safety is necessary for attachment. But emotional closeness is not built only on safety. It is built on engagement, curiosity, mutual psychological movement. When two people become deeply comfortable, they often stop exploring each other. They assume they already know. An assumption slowly replaces attention. Attention is the currency of emotional intimacy. Without attention, even love feels dull. Not wrong, just muted. Over time, you stop asking, "What are you thinking lately?" and start assuming, "I already know." But no human being remains static. When discovery stops, emotional renewal stops. And when renewal stops, emotional energy fades. Emotional neglect does not require cruelty. It requires absence of attunement. Attunement means noticing subtle emotional changes in your partner, a shift in tone, pause before answering, a different way of breathing. When attunement disappears, small emotional signals go unnoticed. The brain registers this absence unconsciously. And when someone consistently feels emotionally unrecognized, the nervous system reduces vulnerability, protects itself, because vulnerability without attunement feels unsafe. So people begin sharing less, not out of anger, out of self-preservation. And the moment vulnerability decreases, intimacy weakens. This is something most people don't admit. Chaotic relationships often feel intense. Intensity creates emotional stimulation. Stable relationships can become emotionally neutral. Neutrality feels peaceful at first. But humans are not built for emotional flatness. We are built for emotional variation. Without variation, the brain experiences monotony. And monotony inside intimacy creates loneliness. You can be peacefully functioning while internally craving emotional aliveness. And that craving is often misinterpreted as dissatisfaction with the partner, when sometimes it is dissatisfaction with emotional stagnation. Hidden loneliness grows when people stop fully expressing themselves. You soften your opinions. You minimize your needs. You avoid certain topics to keep peace. Peace without authenticity creates quiet resentment. And resentment without expression creates internal isolation. You begin feeling like parts of you are not welcome, even if no one explicitly rejected them. And when parts of you remain unseen for too long, you begin feeling alone, even while loved. Attachment keeps people together, but attachment does not guarantee connection. Attachment is the fear of losing. Connection is the experience of being known. Many couples stay attached. Few remain deeply present. Presence requires ongoing emotional risk. Saying what you actually feel, admitting uncertainty, sharing inner conflict. Without emotional risk, relationships become structured partnerships. Efficient, predictable, emotionally contained, and containment slowly suffocates depth. Psychological intimacy is not built in grand moments. It is built in micro moments, small acknowledgments, soft eye contact, genuine curiosity. When these disappear, emotional silence grows. Not loud silence, but subtle. You start feeling slightly less understood, slightly less excited to share, slightly less emotionally met. These slightlys accumulate until one day you realize you feel emotionally alone in a relationship that looks perfectly stable. Because hidden loneliness feels like betrayal. How can I feel lonely when they treat me well? So instead of addressing it, people suppress it. They distract themselves, work more, scroll more, stay busy. But emotional deprivation does not disappear. It becomes chronic. And chronic emotional loneliness changes the way you experience love. You begin expecting less, feeling less, wanting less, until emotional numbness replaces longing. The most dangerous phase is not conflict. It is quiet adaptation. when you adjust to emotional emptiness, when you convince yourself this is just how long-term love feels, when you stop expecting depth. Because the moment you stop expecting depth, you stop reaching for it. And when both partners stop reaching, distance becomes permanent. Now the relationship stands in a subtle emotional void. Stable, functional, externally calm, internally disconnected, and neither partner fully understands why. And this is where hidden loneliness stops being passive. It begins searching, not consciously, subconsciously, because the human nervous system cannot tolerate prolonged emotional deprivation. When connection feels flat for too long, the brain begins scanning for stimulation. Not necessarily for a new partner, but for a new feeling, a moment where you feel understood again, a conversation where someone asks deeper questions, a look that lingers just slightly longer, and suddenly you feel something you haven't felt in a while, aliveness. And that aliveness feels dangerous because it exposes what has been missing. When someone new shows curiosity about you, your brain reacts strongly. Not because they are better, but because they are attentive. Attention is emotionally intoxicating. When someone asks, "What do you really think about that?" your nervous system activates, because that question signals interest, recognition, engagement. And if you have not felt deeply engaged in your relationship for months or years, that moment feels powerful. This is where many people misinterpret their emotions. They believe they are falling for someone else, but often they are reacting to the return of psychological visibility, the return of being seen. Loneliness amplifies emotional response. When you have been emotionally deprived, even small attention feels intense. The brain releases dopamine in response to novelty and recognition, and that chemical shift feels like connection. But it is often contrast. Contrast between emotional flatness and emotional stimulation. The danger is not the new person. The danger is the comparison. Because once you experience emotional aliveness again, returning to emotional neutrality feels heavier, and dissatisfaction grows silently. When hidden loneliness persists, people begin emotionally withdrawing to protect themselves, not from their partner, from disappointment. They share less, expect less, invest less emotionally. This is not dramatic detachment. It is slow emotional reduction, and this reduction feels safe, because expecting nothing prevents hurt, but it also prevents intimacy. And over time, emotional reduction becomes emotional separation. Two people living together, but growing internally apart. At this stage, the relationship still functions. You respect each other. You care. You fulfill responsibilities. But emotional spontaneity disappears. There is no deeper exploration, no emotional rediscovery. You stop surprising each other. Stop challenging each other's perspectives. Stop growing psychologically together. And love becomes structured companionship. Companionship is not wrong. But when companionship replaces intimacy, loneliness deepens. Because humans are not wired only for partnership. We are wired for emotional resonance. Because admitting loneliness feels ungrateful. How can I say I feel alone when they treat me well? So instead of speaking, people internalize. They assume, maybe this is just adulthood. Maybe this is how long-term love feels. And this belief is what keeps hidden loneliness alive. Because the moment you normalize emotional emptiness, you stop trying to restore depth. Eventually, something shifts internally. You stop imagining emotional repair. You stop hoping for deeper conversations. You stop expecting to feel fully known. This is the quiet point where loneliness transforms into detachment. Not hatred, not anger, just emotional distance. And distance rarely announces itself. It simply becomes the new normal. Hidden loneliness does not mean love is fake. It means attention faded. It means vulnerability slowed. It means curiosity stopped renewing itself. Modern life makes this easy. Distraction steals presence. Routine replaces exploration. Comfort replaces depth. But loneliness is not always the end. Sometimes it is awareness, a signal that connection needs consciousness again. Because emotional intimacy is not maintained automatically. It must be chosen repeatedly, through curiosity, through listening, through emotional risk. Without those, even strong love becomes quiet. And maybe the most honest question is not, why am I lonely? Maybe the question is, when did we stop truly looking at each other? Because loneliness inside a relationship does not begin with absence. It begins with unnoticed emotional drift. And drift can be reversed, but only if named, only if acknowledged, only if both people are willing to rediscover each other, not as roles, but as evolving human beings. If you recognized yourself in this, do not rush toward escape. Pause, reflect, speak, because silence grows distance, but awareness can rebuild depth. Take a slow breath. Let this sit with you. And if this conversation gave language to a feeling you could never explain, subscribe to Voxlore Audio, where we explore the psychology behind the emotions most people live silently.